Podcasting from Heroes Media Group with real, relevant, and raw opinions. This is the College Sports Hour with your host, Clint McPherson, and co-host, Greg Dixon.
What's up, guys? You're listening to episode 3 of the College Sports Hour, and we are talking about what went down week 4 in college football. I'm your host, Clint, and I'm sitting here with co-host Greg. On this episode, guys, we'll be talking about how the top 25 fared over the weekend, who in the top 25 took care of business, who in the top 25 didn't take care of business, how those upsets impact their seasons moving forward, and address any final thoughts we might have from week 4. We'll also talk about the new top 25 rankings, highlight some important week 5 matchups, and address who we have on upset alert heading into week 5. Without further ado, what's up, brother?
Hey, how we doing, guys? Hope everybody's doing great, having a great start to their week, man, enjoying things going on so far. College football is in the air. Things are going fantastic. Some teams are loving life. Some teams are hating life, but that's the fun part about college football.
Without a doubt, brother. I mean, college football had this week 4 had it all, man. And all I can say is, wow.
I'm telling you, man, it was a weekend that, you kind of went into it. Maybe didn't look so hot on paper. There were only a handful of matchups that you kind of got really excited about. But at the end of Saturday night, man, everybody was left scratching their heads, wondering what the rest of this college football season was going to look like.
Without a doubt, man. I was just coming into this weekend, like you said, on paper, I was looking, and I'm like, man, what? We talked and touched on it in the last episode because this is episode 3. And we just talked about, it was like, again, I mean, I think it's a direct reflection of week 2 as well. When we looked and there wasn't much on paper, but again, the week came and we saw some exciting finishes and several upsets.
It's kind of the thing about this, how this thing is going out and how this thing is playing out, is that when you begin to take a look at the college football season and week to week in its totality, it seems like each week there isn't a whole lot there that you're going to be able to talk about. But no, it never fails that there's always some games that surprise you. There's always some teams that show up that you don't think are going to show up, or vice versa. Other teams that kind of you expect them to come out there gangbusters, but then they fall flat.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, that really caught me. There's some teams that, even when we did our predictions, I was like, oh, they're going to put up video game numbers, and then they just did not produce. And I'm sitting there wondering, like, okay, I read too much into some of these teams, and you got to take it for what it's worth, though. It's college football. It's exciting. And if you don't expect a team to get upset during a given week, you're really missing out. So the week started on Thursday. There wasn't much going on, no ranked teams playing. There was some exciting games, but it really took off on Friday when we had Penn State playing against, they were playing against an Illinois team, a Lovie Smith Illinois team that I just didn't know too much about. But that first half, Illinois made it a game, brother.
I tell you what, man, this wasn't a game that was really high on my radar either. I was just kind of sitting there going, okay, you've got, got Penn State coming in there. They're highly ranked. You got Illinois. They're not a whole lot of conversation about Illinois going into it. And you really expected Penn State to dominate. That first half really began to scratch your head a little bit. But man, Penn State really got that running game going. And at least in that game right there, that running game looked really, really strong. And they were able to kind of flex their muscle a little bit and then pull away there at the end too.
Yeah, I mean, I want to say that Illinois had a 24-21 lead, if I'm not mistaken, and it might have been the other way around. But coming down to it, whether it was 24-21 Penn State at the time, they scored 35 points before you can blink, and that's what separates some of these ranked teams that are good, like a Penn State, from some of these teams like Illinois. I mean, they can show up any given week and upset a Penn State, but you can see the talent really shown through for James Franklin's Penn State Nittany Lions, man.
Well, you know what? We say it all the time that while college football has a long season, every game matters. Every game counts. This game right here each week is playing into your destination of where you want to go throughout the rest of the season. You can't really just lose one game and still be there at the end and be in that conversation. So you got to be very careful about these teams that'll sneak up on you. Playing on a Friday night, that gets you out of your rhythm, that gets you out of your routine. And you know this as a former athlete, playing college sports, that routine is everything. You get your mindset right, you get in the right frame of mind, and everything kind of works out the day that it's supposed to. And if you're used to playing on a Saturday, man, having a game on a Friday, that can really throw your routine into a whack. So maybe that's a little bit why Penn State came out a little bit flat there in the beginning, but then really began to crank it out in that second half.
Oh, yeah. And there was Friday night also treated us to another good game, I thought. I mean, UCF, Central Florida, got a run for their money from Florida Atlantic. I didn't see Florida Atlantic. I know they can score, but I didn't see them being able to hang with, the Knights at all, the Central Knights. I really thought that, Central Florida was really going to be able to separate themselves quickly in this game. And they can score. Don't get me wrong. In Central Florida, from having that undefeated run last year, they are not a team you can take lightly. They can score the rock. And I mean, you can still tell that talent that Frost brought into that team, it's still there.
Well, there's going to be some of that, that lingering effect there. He didn't leave that program in shambles by any means. He kind of got them going in the right direction before he headed off to Nebraska. But I mean, you're looking at two teams that are from the state of Florida, looking for bragging rights, so to speak, within that state as far as they're concerned. Florida Atlantic was in there looking for an upset. I mean, they were looking to knock out UCF and be able to have some conversation to be had. Nobody gave them a whole lot of credit going into that game, thinking that they were going to be able to hang. I certainly didn't either. And at the end of the day, UCF was able to handle business, take care of business, and keep moving on to fight another day.
Yeah, man. Going into Saturday though, this is the day that everybody's looking for, because you have majority of the games, you have some big matchups going on, and you had College Game Day go to Eugene to go sit there and broadcast the Stanford and Oregon game. And we got treated to the Alabama game, which a lot of people thought Texas A&M were going to give them a run for the money. I knew if anybody could do it, that Jimbo Fisher would be able to have that capability. But, man, Alabama's offense, like we continue to talk about, is clicking. They're in championship form this early in the season, and that it could be deadly.
Before we jump into talking about Alabama, Jimbo Fisher deserves a lot of credit for what he's already begun to do at Texas A&M. You can already see the culture change happening there. Those guys are believing in themselves. They're believing in their team, believing that they can come in there and they can make some noise and they can hang with just about anybody. You saw it in week 2 when they played Clemson at home. But, of course, playing Alabama in Tuscaloosa is a completely different ball game, a completely different story. And you're right, man, that offense is looking good. That quarterback they got, I feel like the broken record here saying it every single week, man, that quarterback is something special. They do still seem to have a little bit of the controversy going on, not the fact that Tua, I can't pronounce the guy's name, man. He's going to have to forgive me if he ever hears this. But I'm just going to call him QB1. He is certainly the starter. He's the one that they're hanging their hats on. They're riding him. But you got Hurst, who came in there in the fourth quarter when the game was put away. He got a chance to get some reps in there. I know there's been some conversation there that they're kind of hanging their heads on about what's Hurst going to do. Is he going to, they got the new rule this year where you can play 4 games and still redshirt. So is he going to redshirt the rest of the year and keep his eligibility and then transfer out of there? His dad came out before the season ever started talking about, his son deserved the starting job and that kind of deal. And so we'll see what happens there. The conversation that I'm hearing right now is that he's going to hang in there. He's going to be a part of this team going forward. So we'll see what happens there. But, man, that offense is looking good. And we know Nick Saban's teams has all been based on run and defense. And that running game and that defense hasn't gone anywhere. That's still there too. But now they're just throwing in there this insanely great quarterback who's coming in there just throwing dimes, throwing touchdown passes, throwing it all over the field. And Nick Saban's still Nick Saban.
Oh, without a doubt. I think Hurts, he's in a tough position. He's still part of the team. Nick Saban has already commented. I want to say I read an article today that he's still going to continue to use the 2 QB system. And if you're Hurts, you got to be the team. You got to be a team player, and you got to do what's best for the team. And when you got Tua just on point like he is, it's hard to argue that you should be the starter over somebody that is just playing lights out. I mean, this guy is special, like you said, and I don't see him losing that job outright. No matter, I don't even care what he does, because he's going to do it better than Hurts no matter what.
Yeah,
So
there's something to be said there on that end, but there's also something to be said for Hurst's leadership. I mean, it's not like this guy has a losing record or anything. Like, he led them to the national championship game last year. Granted, he was playing like garbage in that first half, and he got yanked, that kind of deal. But I mean, that's not to say that maybe he didn't learn some stuff over the offseason. So I mean, I can certainly get where he's coming from about wanting his playing time. But with all that being said, you go in there, you play the game like a man. You go in there and you fight the game. You fight the job out. Whoever wins, may the best man get on the field, and then you support him from there. And I'll say this: that's what we've heard from Jalen Hurst as well. We haven't heard any negative comments out of him about anything or trying to be a distraction to that team or anything like that.
Oh yeah, he's an excellent. He has excellent character. He has the talent to be a starter. It's just unfortunate he has had Tua right behind him. Last season that he was a gifted athlete. Everybody knew it was just a matter of time. He stepped up, delivered the championship, helped them deliver that championship. Now it's hard not to ride the hot hand, man. And so
Sure.
I think again, Nick Saban. He's been known to ride the hot hand. He's been known to shuffle QBs. He's not scared. I don't think it matters to him if a quarterback has led them to 12 wins. Again, it was a perfect example. I mean, if you win, you can still lead his team to an undefeated season. But if you're not ready to play in that championship game, or if you slip up by any means, and he thinks he has a better option, he's going to go with it. And he's not scared. He's not scared to pull that trigger.
Well, he is Nick Saban, maybe go down as the greatest college football coach there ever was. So I think he's earned a little bit of clout there for us to kind of step back and say, hey, whatever you feel like is best, we're probably going to support you on this. You've got the national championships to prove it, and pretty much everybody's going to follow suit with whatever he says anyways.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, we move on to Georgia. You came in thinking it was going to be an intriguing matchup. I thought it was going to be just shellacking from the Bulldogs on Missouri. I know Missouri had a good team coming in at 3-0. Maybe, like you said, not enough love, not being ranked, whatever it was the case. They got a good offense. And so it was one of the things that Georgia saw, that their offense is not bad. There was a couple things at the beginning, the no call when the guys, forward progress was stopped, and the touchdown was returned for a touchdown. It got called off, and that gave Georgia some momentum. It took the momentum away from Missouri right off the bat and deflated them quick. And it could have been a different game if that was the case, but I really don't think so. I still think Georgia would have pulled it off because, I mean, again, Georgia's Georgia right now, and they're going to have close games against some of these SEC opponents, and Missouri is one of them.
One of the things that was leading me to say, hey, this might end up being a close game, was because Missouri had played Georgia really, really tough 2 years ago when they had traveled down there. Matter of fact, they ended up beating them. And so it was kind of like, okay, what may happen the next go around here as they came into town? I don't know. I knew that Missouri would have a really good offense. I don't know that I expected Georgia's defense to show up the way that it did. I don't know that I expected some of those turnovers to come into play. I didn't expect special teams. Their special teams department. Look, we've talked a lot about Georgia's offense. We talked a lot about their quarterback and their running game, but their defense, even though they've got Kirby Smart there on the sidelines and everything, I don't know that that's been the topic of conversation that everybody's focused in on. I know that I was pleasantly surprised to watch that defense really come into play there. Jake Fromm did his thing. I mean, everybody played well in that game, but that defense really showed me something against Missouri.
Yeah, no doubt. Moving on to Clemson. So Clemson really, they took care of Georgia Tech, but there is some QB controversy going over there too. I want to say that Dabo's already pulled the trigger. I think after watching that freshman play and post the numbers and seeing what he's done in his short appearances at the beginning of the season, I really think he's taking the reins right now. And going forward, I really think we'll see him get that QB1 spot.
Matter of fact, just to kind of piggyback on that, I think I saw it come across the ticker today or a little bit earlier that he had named Trevor Lawrence to be the starting quarterback going into next week against Syracuse. And so that'll be something to watch there with them. And also, kind of here we go again, watching a national championship contender switching quarterbacks, going with the younger arm, going with the more athletic, maybe not more athletic guy that's there, but making a QB change here and seeing what's going to happen. And we're going to watch how Kelly Bryant responds as well. He started this game this past week against Georgia Tech. He got the first two series, and then Trevor Lawrence came in there and really had himself a really good game. So we're going to see what happens with them. My question about Trevor Lawrence was not his arm strength, was not his ability to play the quarterback position or anything like that, but would he be able to lead that team? Would they galvanize around him and be able to follow him as their leader? That remains to be seen, but it does look like that Clemson team likes playing with Trevor Lawrence as they like playing with Kelly Bryant as well.
Exactly. I mean, he definitely has looked good ever since he stepped onto the field. He's definitely not disappointing, and everybody can see the talent. And again, Dabo, just like Saban, is not scared to pull the trigger for whatever is best for the team. He's going to make that change, and just not even bat an eye. So that's what excites me about that Clemson team. Moving forward with Ohio State and Tulane. I mean, God, the Ohio State just smashed them that first half and basically put the car in park and walked off. So, Haskins had 5 touchdowns in the first half. Yeah. Again, I believe they put at halftime, they didn't come back out. They just sent some fans out there and just let them do what they did against Tulane. It was like their offense is very high powered, and we saw that against TCU. But again, man, if they continue to play like they did that first half against Tulane and that second half, they could have put 100 on them easily.
There are a lot of people around the country who really believe that it will come down to Alabama versus Ohio State, and I actually believe that Ohio State could be the team to knock off Alabama. If they continue to play that they've been playing this season so far, I don't see anybody stopping them in their conference or anything like that. I don't know if Urban Meyer is coming out with feeling like he's got something to prove, trying to put the controversy of what happened with him and his wide receivers coach behind him and that whole situation. But I know that his players came out ready to play against Tulane, and they never looked back.
Agreed. So the Oklahoma Army game that came out of nowhere.
What? Talk about a wow game right there. There you go.
What? It was funny because I was on social media earlier today and I saw my brigade commander at the time. I don't know what he's doing. I think he's DSC or something on post somewhere. But he ran out with the Army team for the game. Oh, wow. And I thought that was cool seeing him running out, somebody that led me in combat, and seeing him lead the charge. And then those boys came ready to play. I saw them play against Duke. And again, you could tell they had some talent on the defense and offensive side of the ball. They just couldn't seem to get it together. But Duke's not a bad team at all. They're very good. They're very fundamentally sound. But I just didn't see watching Oklahoma at the beginning of the year. I did not see this coming because Oklahoma has been scoring. They've been on point, the quarterback position and their defense. You can't say enough about what Oklahoma's done up to this point, but they struggled against that triple option.
Absolutely. I want to say that Army ran the ball with 9 different players for over 300 yards rushing, I believe is something along those lines, which is an insane. I mean, you sit there and think about it. Okay, 9 different people got back there and ran that ball through that triple option and ran it for over 300 yards against a team like Oklahoma, which you expect there to be a little bit of a better defensive prowess coming on with that game. But I'll tell you this as well. Oklahoma's quarterback Murray has been in that conversation, the preseason conversation for the Heisman conversation that's been going on there. If they continue on this little run that they've got, he's certainly going to make a name for himself as well, kind of following in the footsteps of Baker Mayfield and what all happened there with him last year, really setting a great standard for them. Yeah, it was tight. Yes, it came down to overtime, but they won. At the end of the day, they were able to pull out the W. This could have very well been a game that they would have overlooked, that they would not have circled on the schedule and said, hey, there's a team we got to watch out for or anything like that. But I think it just goes to show you that Army is not a team that you can take lightly at any point in your season.
Yes, I mean, the triple option could get you and it could get anybody. There's plenty of teams that have been bit by that triple option, especially if you don't play it on a regular basis.
Absolutely.
So the LSU game wasn't very exciting to me. It was Louisiana Tech hung with them and kept it close. But LSU really had control of that game majority of the time. But I mean, again, they grinded out. They grinded out a win, and they found a way to get the W at the end of the day. So
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry about that, but it was one of those things to where it's like Coach O is putting his team, in the right positions, and it doesn't have to be pretty. I got it. But at the same time, you're expecting LSU at number 6 and how fast they came up through the rankings to just start knocking these lower level teams off without much of a thought.
Well, here's the thing too, is that as much as we say that, certain teams will sneak up on you and you're not really prepared to play them as hard as they're willing to play you, and you just kind of eke out the win there. You got to be very, very careful about that, because if you let some of these teams hang around long enough, one of them's going to end up biting you, and it's going to be the end of your season. So you can't just let them hang around, which is what Louisiana Tech did against LSU. They hung in there. I really feel like that, this game, I feel like this game was never really out of hand for LSU. That the score at certain points in time during the game would indicate that it was a lot closer than what it felt like it was. But LSU's got to play better than what they did against Louisiana Tech if they're going to make any kind of run through the remainder of this season.
Without a doubt, they have to step it up. They have to be more, fundamentally sound all across the board. But again, they're in a good position. I like LSU. They're looking good. I think they're going to be there, and they're going to cause some fits for some of these teams. And I believe, though, again, like you said, if they don't come ready to play every week in and week out, they can easily get bit, and they don't want to fall, unprepared to somebody and looking past somebody trying to get to the next game.
Absolutely.
So the Stanford game, man, let's talk about that. That College Game Day picked an excellent game to be at. Anytime they pick a Stanford game, though, I'm just like, that's just my reaction. I'm just like, whatever. Right. But dude, this Stanford and Oregon game delivered.
It was really the tale of two halves. At halftime, Oregon looked firmly in control of this game. You kind of look at it, it's kind of like, well, and that was a game that I had picked Stanford to go in and win. I thought this is the year for them to make a run, so I thought that they might be able to pull this game out. But I've got to be honest with you, at halftime, I'm sitting there scratching my head, wondering, man, boy, did I miss this one. Oregon's sitting there running all over them. They're kind of having their way, even when you feel like that Stanford's making some good moves there in the first half. That is, Oregon would just kind of answer right back. But then that second half, really, Stanford began to kind of make its charge and, did some really, you did some good things, but then you got to get some lucky bounces. And Stanford certainly got some lucky bounces on their favor.
Oh, without a doubt, that one fumble towards the end of the game when Oregon was right. Just trying to get that first down, and the running back just made that huge mistake when it was only second down at the time too, and he's trying to fight for the extra yard like it's a fourth down play, and he just drops it, and that allows them to kick that field goal, force overtime, and then ultimately win it. That was crushing. I know.
How about the? Go ahead. I was going to say, how about the receiver in overtime tapping the ball up in the air to himself so that he can catch the touchdown pass? Are you kidding me on that?
Beautiful, man. Did you see after the running back fumbled that ball and he came to the sideline, they zoomed right up on him. Yeah. He was out of breath. He was breathing, but he looked like he was about to vomit all over himself. Like I gotta imagine. He was just nauseous. You could tell, like, he was like, what did I just do? I think he knew just instantly, even though his team was winning at the time, that he cost his team the game, and ultimately he did.
Well, you think about it, you're in that situation. All you got to do is run out the clock. At this point, you pretty much got the game won. All you got to do is hold on to the ball. Yeah, I get it. You're driving your legs, man. You're trying to fight for that extra yardage. You're trying to get that first down to put the icing on the cake there and to walk this thing home. And you got, as we say sometimes, man, you got one job to do. And really that one job was to hold on to that ball. And it got stripped out of there, clean as a whistle. Stanford comes up with it, and then they make a nice drive back down to the field. Props to the Stanford kicker, as we had talked about last week, man. Several kickers missing some big kicks. Stanford kicker jumps in there, cool as the other side is the pillow, as the great Stuart Scott used to say, and man, just knocked that thing through the uprights, and man, went on to send that game in overtime and come up with a W.
Yeah, that game, even though it was very late. That and the Arizona State game, man, I stayed up and watched both of them, and I was glued to the TV for both games. So let's talk about the game. I thought Wake Forest was just going to come in and, that Notre Dame was going to get upset by Wake Forest by coming into Winston-Salem, and that did not happen. Them boys went to the backup quarterback, which was I agreed with because they've been struggling on the offensive side of the ball. And they clicked, man. Cook came in there and put some numbers up, and I don't think they're going back, man.
It'd be very difficult to make that decision to go back once you've already kind of pulled the plug here and started going with this new quarterback. He looked good. You wonder if that's just a one-game wonder, or the other opposing team didn't really prepare for this other quarterback. What's going to happen there? But you got some momentum now. You finally are looking like a really good Notre Dame team at this point. Granted, it's against Wake Forest. Wake Forest is not a national powerhouse or anything like that. It'll be interesting to see what happens the rest of the season. But for this one game, Notre Dame came in there to Winston-Salem, which can be a really good environment to play a football game in, and was really able to handle their business, take care of business, and go out of there with a W.
Yeah, Wake Forest just bummed me out this past weekend. It's not like I'm a Wake Forest fan, but right. I was feeling it, man. And when you got that feeling, and you're like, they're gonna pull this off, and they have a good offense. And so I was thinking, it was that running game, they're gonna get it going. Notre Dame's been struggling lately, and they've been playing down to their opponents' levels, and Wake Forest did not deliver.
Right. That's kind of that might be a little bit par for the course for Wake Forest fans. They feel like they got a team that might have some conversation around them, and then it just doesn't deliver. So I think Wake Forest fans would agree with that wholeheartedly, that they understand what you're trying to say.
Oh, without a doubt. So Auburn really breezed their SEC game with Arkansas 34-3. They had no problems with that game.
What's to say about that game?
So Washington, man, I was feeling this game. You came in. We've been talking about the last several weeks about Herm Edwards and the feel good story and the good start. They got off the 2-0 start. Washington. I didn't think, even though I wanted to say Arizona State can pull this off, I just thought that the quarterback that Washington has, would ultimately lead them to victory. And I really thought, heading into that game, Arizona State coming off those two close losses and just, being man, they've been so close again. But you can see the Herm Edwards coach team, they're still in the game. It didn't seem, they're fundamentally sound. Their offensive is good. It just seems like you said they got to right the ship, but I don't think they have as many adjustments as a lot may think. They're still learning a new coaching system. They're still trying to figure this whole thing out, but you can tell that experience that Herm Edwards has translated over into these close games, and has allowed his team to be as close as they have at the end of these games.
Yeah, man, I was watching this game, and I did pick Arizona State to upset Washington. For whatever reason, man, I'm just not sold on Washington. They do have a really good quarterback. They got a good system up there, and they are playing well. Don't get me wrong. I'm just not sold on them as this really great team that's going to end up coming out of the Pac-12 or anything like that. But so I picked Arizona State to upset them. Granted, part of that was with my heart, because I'm a big fan of Herm Edwards here. But I remember I was watching the beginning of this game, and I texted you immediately when it happened. But it looked like they tried the Philly special. Washington did on their first play, and ended up throwing an interception. And I was like, they just intercepted the ball in the first play of the game, man. This is what's gonna happen. They're gonna gain some momentum, and then they did drive down and score there on that drive. But man, Washington was able to answer right back, and then man kind of began to again unravel a little bit there. You're right. The game never got out of hand. It was never this point where Washington was just racking up yards or racking up points on the Arizona State team. They still have got. I feel like Arizona State still got to get to the point. They had that really big win against Michigan State a couple of weeks ago, but they got to get to the point, man, where they can finish off these games, and they can believe in themselves in order to be able to win. Place. I think Herm's going to get them there. I feel like they need a little more talent as well, and I think Herm will bring that with the recruiting over the next couple of years. Well, but if you're an Arizona State fan, you got to be proud of your team. You got to be proud of the way that they're playing. They didn't show up and play the way that you wanted them to last week, but for the most part, man, those guys played hard against Washington. Almost came away with the victory. Almost came away there, but just not enough for this particular week.
Yeah, man. And all you can ask for right now from them is to compete. And that's what they're doing week in and week out. And like you said, I'm definitely not sold on Washington by no means.
Right.
I just didn't see Arizona State getting this game. And again, it was competitive, but Washington took it, again. Herm Edwards, man, he looked so comfortable over there on the sideline, and he makes you believe, I'm in my living room believing that his team's going to do something. So, and that's a good thing.
That's one of those guys right there that you'll run through that brick wall for, just knowing that he's going to be right there with you because you ain't running alone.
Yeah, without a doubt. So the West Virginia game, man, they ran through Kansas State. Not much really happening there. West Virginia has a high-powered offense. I thought they were going to score a little more than they did. Kansas State, as typically in the past, they have a stout defense. But again, putting up 35, Kansas State, just the offense isn't there. They're not clicking on all cylinders, but it could go to say a lot for West Virginia's defense too. And typically it's West Virginia's been able to score a lot of points, but they allow a lot of points. In this game, they only held Kansas State to 6, which was great.
I was curious what would happen with them, knowing that they were coming off of a impromptu bye week. And they were, and so not knowing what would happen with them, were they going to be, a little bit sluggish coming into it? Were they going to be able? Would Kansas State be able to sneak up on them a little bit there? But obviously that wasn't the case. West Virginia went in there, was able to really kind of have their way. They flexed their muscle. There wasn't anything that they wanted to do that they couldn't do, and they were able to do everything they needed to do to come away with a win.
Another team that let me down in my predictions, Iowa. What is going on? They're at their home field. They got the advantage. They're big corn-fed. They're ready to. They're like the Cornhuskers, of the past. They're like ready to just eat somebody's lunch, and they go against a Wisconsin team that was ready. And I was like, no, I did not see Wisconsin rebounding like they did. Iowa just did not. I don't think they even. Okay, it was 28-17. It was close, but Iowa just didn't have it from the beginning, man.
No, they didn't. And this was another game that you were looking at. Okay, how would Wisconsin respond after their defeat last week? Were they going to be able to come in there ready? Yeah, they were going on the road, and so you're going to wait and see what happens. And Wisconsin's another one of those teams that I don't know is going to be a team that puts up just a tremendous amount of points. I don't think that's going to be their style or anything along those lines. But they're able to come in there. It's another one of those grinded out games. We're going to see how this thing plays into the second half. And they were able to, begin to pull away there a little bit towards the second half and do what they needed to do to move on to next week.
So Michigan comes in and does the same thing Ohio State did to Tulane. Right. They basically put the car in park and left, the parking lot.
I didn't get a chance to, this game wasn't on in my area to be able to watch it or anything, but I just kept seeing the highlights come across the bottom, and it was 7, 14, 21. And it was still the first quarter. I was like, man, what was going on over there?
Dude, I know at halftime, I want to say, I don't remember exactly what the score was, but I want to say they scored 56 points in the first half and called it a day. Again, they sent the B team out there, or probably the water boys and all that stuff, and just said, Nebraska, good luck. If you come back, you come back. If you don't, you don't. And they definitely did not. Scott Frost has some work to do. I know it's going to be a while for his system to get implemented. And what are these coaches thinking? And I don't want to take us off the subject of Michigan and Nebraska, but what are these coaches thinking? They come from successful programs. They go to their alma mater or whatever it is, and they start struggling.
It's not only what they're thinking, it's also probably what the fan base is thinking. It's what the schools themselves are thinking. You got to, I think a lot of times we want to try to pull the hook way too soon, way too early. We come in there with these high, maybe sometimes insane expectations of what these new coaches are going to do. And I get it, man. I'm a part of a fan base too that wants to see results, and you don't want to see anything deter you from that. But you look at a team like Nebraska and Scott Frost coming in there, it's kind of hard not to begin to look around and scratch your head when you suffer a 56-10 loss. You might have expected to lose that game, but I think you probably also expected for it not to be as large as it was just specifically for them. But he's not the only one that's sitting there with the fan base scratching their head too, wondering what in the world's going to happen, where things are going to go from here. And you're just kind of keeping your fingers crossed and praying that things begin to get better and you start to see a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, man, I can probably, I just feel his pain, and I haven't been in those situations, but I'm just looking, and I've seen, like, for Coach Willie Taggart for FSU, I see him on the sidelines. Obviously, they got to win this past weekend. Struggled in that game in the second half, but when you see the coaches over there, just it's one of those things, it's like an ego check. They're riding high. They got, they got the feel good story behind them, but nothing's coming together like they wanted to. Nothing's coming together like they envisioned, and they can't come fast enough for them, and they look lost. And I haven't seen Coach Frost on the sideline, but I know Willie Taggart, man. When there's nothing happening or with his team struggling, he just. It's not one of those coaches that typically, it's like when you see somebody like a Jimbo Fisher, yeah, he might show a little bit of emotion. Like he shows emotion. He gets in people's face, but
Sure.
he doesn't look lost. That's my question. My only hope is like, man, I know you're a coach and your players might not be doing anything you practice during the week, but looking lost to me is, it's a sign of weakness. And it's one of those things like, dude, when things don't go your way as a coach, you got to continue. You got to make adjustments. You got to be willing to change the game plan on the fly and just go with your gut feeling. Because if you come up with a game plan and you don't have a plan B, you're just going to struggle.
Well, let's not forget these guys, these men are coaching young men. They're coaching kids. I mean, 18, 19, 20, 21 years old kids. They're standing there on the sideline and they're looking to you. You're the leader of the team. So even if you don't have the answers, and none of us have all the answers all the time or anything like that, but you got to come in there with a game plan. You got to come in there with option B, option C. And let me just throw this tidbit out there too. If you're an FSU fan or just somebody who's intrigued by Florida State University and you haven't yet, you need to check out my man Clint's blog post that he put up last week on our website, collegesportshour.com. Go take a little read on that one. Drop in some comments on. Let's hear your thoughts on FSU as well. He might be a little bit passionate about those Seminoles and what's happening down there, but man, that's what makes us all kind of you come together about stuff like this, is because we're all fans of teams and like to see our teams do well.
Yeah, man, and I think as fans we have the right to hate on our team. But at the same time, don't jump on the, jump off the. It's like one of those things. Like, why are you hating on your team? I have the right. I've been a Florida State fan my whole life, and when things don't go right, I have the right to complain about it. I have the right to say, "Dude, what's going on?" I mean,
right.
And with having the the history, the rich history that's Florida State, I just never seen a 3-game stretch as bad as what Florida State started this year off of. And I know they've had winless seasons in the past, transitioning from an all-women's school to what they are now. But it's one of those things, man, you have to expect that. But, we've only had 3 coaches in the last
right.
how many years? Okay. I mean, just think about it. This, and one of the coaches, and they didn't get fired. I mean, obviously, Bobby Bowden got ran out. But, we gave him an option. Obviously, he's being forced out, but Jimbo Fisher left. It wasn't like we fired him. But it's one of those things is like we don't go through many coaching changes because we end up figuring it out. And I'm not saying that Willie Taggart's not going to figure it out. I believe he is. Yeah. He is afforded the chance to have as much time as that's needed. But again, man, the lethal simplicity and the confidence and the buildup, man, just fell flat on its face.
Right, and I think part of that too is probably it has a lot to do with the tradition and the history, specifically of Florida State. I would say the same thing about a Nebraska team or some of these other teams out there that do have such a rich history of college football and national championships and being a powerhouse in the years. And so immediately when you come in there are expectations to win. There's not expectations to be competitive. There are expectations to win. And when you don't win, people will begin to second guess you. And that's just kind of the nature of anybody for any job that you do, man. You don't come in there and you're not successful. People will second guess the hire. People will second guess the job that you're doing. And it's up to you in whatever profession that you're in to get the buy-in from those that are around you, get buy-in from the leadership that's above you. And if you can't do that in the time that's allotted to you, then you go on and you do something else.
Yeah, without a doubt. So the final three teams that really got the job done this weekend, which we're going to go back to Miami before we jump off this, but Michigan State handled Indiana. I mean, it was a close game. It wasn't, again, I'm not sold on this Michigan State team, but BYU handled it against McNeese, as you can expect. But the Miami Florida International game, that quarterback controversy, again, another team, Mark Richt, not afraid to pull the trigger, put the backup QB in, and the guy got the job done. And now, after reading your article, I agreed. He has a decision to make, Mark Richt. But he actually made that decision to pull the trigger. They are going with that, the backup QB as a QB1 now.
Oh, I had not heard that. So that, I mean, and I guess, if you're a coach and you got to plan, you're sitting here on Sunday and Monday and you got to plan for a game on Saturday, you don't have time to sit around and really begin to flip a coin or anything like that. You've got to go ahead and make that decision. And you're going to make the decision that you feel like is going to be in the best interest of your program and the best interest of your team. And so we'll see what happens with Miami. Miami has not played up to par this season so far. You came into the season really expecting a lot from them. They are still ranked in the top 25. They are sitting there at 3-1. They just haven't looked great doing it. Going 3-1 to this point just hasn't looked great. Maybe this new quarterback will insert a little bit of energy, a little bit of more life, and they'll get them back on track. Maybe that defense will begin to be the defense that it was last year and break out the turnover chain again. We'll see what happens there. Maybe they need to try a turnover rope or a turnover bicycle. I don't know. Need to try something other than a chain. I don't know. Get some new life into the turnover system.
I say get rid of the props, man. This whole we got to wear a backpack, a chain. I think Boise State has a throne. I mean, all this craziness. Come on, guy. What's going on? I mean, this is where we're at. We're in the age of entitlement. So when we do something, instead of, you got the scholarship to go to school, okay? But now we have to, because I went and made a turnover because I'm playing defense and that's what I'm supposed to do. That's why I'm getting paid scholarship to do. You got to give me a Dora Explorer backpack so I can pimp that around. That's not like, come on, man. And then the Mr. T chain come on, what is going on?
Oh, come on, man. Let's have some fun. Come on. You want to have your Dora Explorer backpack, man. You want to go on a little adventure. Hey, man, give me a thermos out there. If you give me a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle thermos, I'm all about it, all right? We'll roll with that bad boy, and that can be the new turnover prop. I don't care. I tell you what, I'd be willing, if I'm a fan of Miami, I'd be willing to give them just about anything if they could get me a couple of turnovers in a game.
Without a doubt, man. I mean, I totally agree. Right now, that we haven't seen much of the turnover chain, but at the same time, it's just a matter of time before either that happens or that thing needs to be just put in a drawer somewhere.
You know what? If it'll turn around their little their luck and everything, they'll probably will put it in a drawer somewhere.
That's true. So now that we breezed through the teams that basically got it done and took care of business, we're going to go into the teams that basically didn't take care of business in the top 25, and there was an upset of epic proportions. So overall, there were 7 ranked teams that lost this past weekend during week 4 of the college football season, but 5 of those 7 losses were considered upsets. So the biggest surprise again to me that it wasn't an FCS school, obviously, but still
right.
Old Dominion out of all teams upsetting a Virginia Tech team that thought they were the sauce because they beat a struggling Florida State team. So what are your thoughts on that one?
All right, so that win over Florida State maybe isn't looking as good now as it did, that during week 1. But let's say a couple of things here. That you also, you came in there. Old Dominion was winless coming into this game. It was supposed to be the cupcake game before they really got into the heart of their ACC schedule. A backup quarterback again leads Old Dominion to come in there and leads them for a win. Man, I was watching some of this game. I was watching some of the highlights of it as well. They were doing anything and everything they wanted to as they were able. I mean, look, there was not a whole lot of defense in this game. Let's call it what it is. When you get a final score of 49-35, there wasn't a whole lot of defense going on. But this quarterback, man, to put in towards the end of the game in the fourth quarter, drops a touchdown pass in there to kind of ice the game away and seal it up, puts them up by another touchdown in the closing minutes of the game. He drops it in between 2 defenders that Virginia Tech had right around the wide receiver in the end zone. I never want to say that anybody quits on any play or anything. I've never played college ball, so that's not my place to say anything like that. But it did look like the defenders gave up on that play. And man, it drops it as a beautiful pass, drops it right down into the breadbasket. That wide receiver came up with the catch and really was able to push them on into victory. It was an insane game. Insane that there's no way that game should have been a win for Old Dominion. But there it is. They got a W out of it.
And going back to it, man, backup quarterback. Like, what? Old Dominion. Like, if you would have told me, I would have bet the house, man, on this is not even possible. It was possible because it happened. So
Absolutely.
that's the thing. Again, that was an upset. It might not have been the biggest upset in college football history by no means, but it's huge. I mean, that is Old Dominion's biggest win probably in anything ever. And I
Yeah.
mean that's just huge. Knocking out again. Like I said before, Virginia Tech is not good. It's not that they're not good; they're just not as good as everybody. Ranked 13. I was like, there's no way they might 20th. Okay, I'll give them that. Maybe,
Right.
maybe on the fringe of the top 25. But after seeing what they did against Florida State, I really think their ranking was based off of beating Florida State when they're 19, and they consistently moved up. I knew it was just a matter of time for them to lose, but I did not see Old Dominion being that team.
Virginia Tech's quarterback does go down in that game as well. And I saw the report today that he came out that he has a fractured leg. And so he's out for the foreseeable future as well. So they'll be starting their backup quarterback going over the next couple of weeks and seeing what happens there. So I wish him a speedy recovery as well. Never want to see anybody get hurt or have to go out on anything like that. But man, I tell you what, that was a that was a tough loss for Virginia Tech. You mentioned maybe not the most historic upset ever in college football. I would probably throw up there, my opinion would be App State over Michigan several years ago. But Old Dominion is a school and is a program that had lost its football program just a handful of years and just restarted it, their football program a handful of years ago. And so they're still kind of getting back into the swing of things there. So it is a huge win for that school, a huge something for them to build on as they move forward with their program.
I totally agree. So let's move into the Kentucky upset, number 14, Mississippi State. This is a game that, man, I wish you could have saw me when I was writing my prediction down. I had this one penciled in, and then at the last minute, man, reading your little blurb persuaded me, and I never let that happen. I'm sitting here like, man, I got to go, because if you read it, it builds up like I'm going to pick Kentucky, and then I don't pick Kentucky, because you can tell that I just replaced Kentucky with Mississippi State. And I was like, man, I told you this was going to happen. And I go back and read it. I'm like, I didn't save the proper changes. Why did I go back and change it? But I remember, I'm like, okay, well, I was thinking, Greg has a point, so I'm going to put Mississippi State. And then I was like, I thought I went back and changed it, but I don't think I hit save. So I was bummed when I went back on that. But I mean, again, I knew Kentucky after watching them. They have that magic right now. That defense, the offensive line shocked me. They came out and they were ready. All you heard was how Mississippi State was going to dominate them up front. Offensive line didn't stand a chance. That offensive line held their ground. That running game got going. They didn't have the best passing attack, but they made some crucial pass plays when they needed to. And then, man, those turnovers they were forcing, that defense, that team came ready to play.
Let me go ahead and give you a little bit of credit. You have been talking about Kentucky all season long. You were high on them even before they went in there and beat Florida. You were high on them. I expected you to pick Kentucky to beat Mississippi State this week. When I saw that you didn't, I thought it had to be a mistake. I was extremely shocked, because you're right. The way that you wrote yours up, I thought for sure that you had picked Kentucky to win that game. But I fully confess, fully admit, I did not. I was not on Kentucky at all for this week. I thought I really didn't think that there was any way. I thought this would be the week that the magical ride began to come to an end. That there was no way that they were going to go in there and they were going to beat Mississippi State. I didn't give enough credit to their running game, man. In all honesty, man, I did not see their running game having the attack that it does. I'm extremely impressed with the way that they handled themselves and the way that they were able to dominate. This wasn't a squeak by game. They dominated this game against Mississippi State. Mississippi State could not get anything going for them. And, man, this does a lot for them and does a lot for their season continuing to move forward for Kentucky, man. They have got it going in the right direction.
Yeah, they're gonna have some tough games going forward, but they're in a perfect position right now. They're where they want to be. Anybody that's undefeated is where they want to be. But Kentucky, man, that's one of those things that I don't think in their wildest dreams they could have saw themselves sitting. I think that team believes it, but you ask anybody on the outside, I mean, nobody had that penciled in, man. I don't care who you are, but I'm starting to be a believer in this team after watching them play and dominate the way they were. I was, like I said before, and I think the previous podcast or the podcast before, I'm not a big firm believer in the Mississippi State team. And it's not that, not a believer in the team, but it's Mississippi State, man. Like Ole Miss. It's like one of the, okay, when was the last time they were just dominant? And there's not that many times where they're going to be that Alabama. They're just not going to show up out of the blue. There's a lot of more work. They are headed in the right direction. There's a lot more work, and I think because they're in the SEC, they get a lot more love than in the rankings than some other teams. But again, this is a perfect example of Mississippi State having a huge opportunity to lock in that position, to move up in the rankings, and they fell flat.
Well, I have a hard time pulling for Kentucky just because I'm a Duke fan, and a lot of that comes from the basketball season, but it does trickle over into football season as well. But while I may not be a fan and may not be the one cheering for them, you got to have some respect for them, have respect for what the program is doing at this point, how they're turning things around. I saw, I find myself laughing at different memes a lot. And so there was a meme that was created that I saw floating around today, and it had the number of times that Duke and Kentucky had both been ranked in the top 25 in basketball, and it was like 567 times. And the number of times that Kentucky and Duke have both been ranked in the top 25 in football, 1. That's this week. Today, this is the first week ever that Kentucky and Duke have both been ranked in the top 25 in the college football season.
Man, that's awesome. We're about to get into that in just a second, and that's awesome because, man, when I saw that, and I saw that stat too, and I've seen the memes, and it's incredible, man. And to see, Kentucky has a couple more bigger wins than Duke has, but Duke has put themselves in perfect position to go, to host Virginia Tech and pull off that win. Again, I'm not a big firm believer in Virginia Tech, and I think Duke will get that job done. But, man, those two teams, Kentucky and Duke, have put themselves in a perfect position to have a great and successful season.
Couple surprise teams that we got we'll talk about in a few minutes.
Yeah, man. So Texas Tech after what Oklahoma State did to Boise State, I did not see them with that offense, because I was really high on Boise State pulling the game off last week. Oklahoma State's offense just was not clicking, and Texas Tech put up some points quick.
That's kind of the nature of Texas Tech for the last several years. The way their program is, man, they got that high-powered offense, and it doesn't seem to matter who the coach is. Man, they're just going to continue to throw that ball around, spread the ball out, and man, they're going to put up points. You're right. I thought Oklahoma State would continue their run after Boise State last week, but you can also see where they would, they have a little bit of a hangover there after pulling off a nice win against Boise State. It kind of takes so much out of you from one week to the next. Didn't seem like that they came to play, and they were prepared to play for this particular week.
So TCU, man,
wow.
After that offense showing up, obviously the second half they lost it against Ohio State, but them just putting up 16 points against this Texas team, showing you that Texas has the momentum. I was not buying the momentum they built up from that USC game. I wasn't sold. But after seeing what they did to TCU this past weekend, I am sold on this Texas team. Actually, they have turned it around, and they look like they're heading in the right direction.
This was a game right here that I thought is going to be a turning point for either one of these programs. One of them's coming off of a big win. One of them's coming off of a hard loss. And you didn't put a whole lot of stock into TCU losing to Ohio State because Ohio State's just that good. Ohio State's going to be a problem for pretty much every team they face for the remainder of this season. So you kind of said, okay, TCU, you lost a hard fought game, come in there, but this is another one of those big rivalry games for Texas versus TCU. There was I saw a stat that TCU had beat Texas the last 4 years, and I remember thinking, this right here, the way this team's going, the way that the program's beginning to change there for the Longhorns, it's about time for them to put an end to that streak, and they were able to. Man, this Texas team is really starting to click. It's really starting to figure out who it is, beginning to develop its own identity. And look, this is not going to be the year that we start seeing the Texas of old, but it is a turning point for this program to start letting them to become back to their greatness and who they can be once again.
Yeah, I agree. So moving on to the Boston College Purdue game. So I'm thinking Boston College has been looking ridiculously strong. I go back and look at Purdue. They're 0-3, but not a bad 0-3 team. It's usually when you see a team that's 0-3, they had, things haven't been bouncing their way. But I didn't see them shutting down Dillon, man. I thought Dillon was going to put up some massive running numbers on them, get some good rushing yards. That just was not the case. They totally flipped the script, and they dominated Boston College for the entire game.
Yeah, there was a lot of conversation. I think we mentioned it last week around Dillon being, making his little Heisman run, making a conversation, having his name in that conversation. Obviously, we're early on in the season, so a lot of names are getting thrown out. but he was up to that point, and he was having some really good games, putting up some big numbers, and there was some conversation surrounding him, and then they just fell flat. I mean, there's no other way to say that. I mean, Purdue's going to be a team that you're going to have to fight against. They're going to play hard, but there's no reason that Boston College, at least in my mind, shouldn't have been able to come out of this game with a win, to continue on with the strong run for their season. And it just didn't happen, man. I don't know what to say about Boston College other than maybe maybe it was just a smoke screen. And we're starting to see a little bit more about who they really are as a team. But it just that, man, I got no rhyme, no reason, no excuses as to why Boston College couldn't come out of there with a victory.
Yeah, I'm looking for them to be a little more competitive in that game. But it was one of those things that just didn't happen. And Purdue, like I said, dominated. I want to say the game was 7-7 at one time, but after that, Purdue ran away with that easily.
Yeah.
So what, out of all that we just talked about, what are your final thoughts after this past week? Obviously it delivered, and Alabama for me just continues to look ridiculously good, and everyone else is still playing catch up in my eyes, man.
I think that I agree with that. I mean, Alabama is certainly the best team in the country, and it seems like they're by far the best team in the country. Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State, maybe even Oklahoma. They're going to have their opportunities to prove how good they are, and if they can compete with Alabama. But right now, Alabama's head and shoulders above everybody else. I think that some of the things that I'm walking away from this week is that man, there were some huge upsets that come into play. That are really going to affect everybody's season. But some of these quarterback decisions that are coming up and coaches are having to make some decisions on, I don't know that I remember a season where several teams were having to make not just injury adjustments at the quarterback position, but just the way that you're playing. Quarterbacks aren't playing well, so they're yanking their quarterback and putting in the backup quarterback. Seeing that happen with Clemson. I mean, Clemson's a national championship contender that we're seeing there to have happen with that. Miami's making that decision as well, making a decision to go to a backup quarterback. So we're going to see what happens with some of those. I'm interested to see what happens with those guys and if they're able to continue to grow and develop under that pressure that they're going to be on.
Yeah, I mean, how many years is it's like everybody likes talking about how bad a two QB system is because you're not going with one the guy allowing him to get in the rhythm. But man, it's not even. I don't even see it like that anymore. I mean, I know Steve Spurrier would get some flack, and some of these coaches when it's not working, they're like, "What are you doing?" And I got that. I get that argument,
right.
But I mean, when you they're seeing these guys in practice. They're seeing the QB1s in the game. And if the QB1 in the game's not getting it done, and there's a lot of cases out there with, like, for instance, Florida State. Charlie Ward, for one, the Heisman Trophy winner, was not somebody that was, he would not catch your eye in practice. So that held him back a little bit. But I think after they threw him in the game, they changed their mind quickly because the dude got on the field. It's like you can be a guy that shows out in practice, and usually your best players are going to be the guys that show off in practice. Those are going to be the guys that stand above everybody. But man, there's some guys that when the lights turn on and you get between those lines, they come out and they play because they are competitors, and they might not have the God-given talent that some of these other guys do, but they work, whether it's work harder than them or they just figure it out and they make it work, and then they just show out.
Well, we're gonna get a chance to see that through the rest of the season. I would imagine that some of these new quarterbacks they're gonna have their moments where they're gonna shine, and they're gonna have their moments where they make some of those early mistakes. And you just got to hope that, your team, if your team's in that position, that you can overcome those mistakes and be able to keep riding the high that they're bringing you and the abilities that they possess.
No doubt, man. So let's transition. Now we're heading into week 5. So the AP Top 25 rankings came out. What jumps out to you other than your boys are ranked, Kentucky's ranked, two teams that were not ranked that are actually moving up? And not only that, but Duke is doing it with the injuries that they sustained, man. They compete like nothing's happened. Like they're not short on players or talent, man. They're out there grinding.
And while we're talking about Duke, let's give a little bit of love there to the head coach, because when you get that many injuries that are playing around there, you got to give some love to the coach and his coaching staff for being able to coach those guys up, having which you would not anticipate, a strong depth there at Duke University in their football program, but they appear to be doing well. They're playing with their backup quarterback still, who has been in that system for a while. A lot of people think that Cutcliffe is a great quarterback coach and is able to coach those guys up because he's got that connection there to the Mannings and was able to coach both of those guys. So he obviously has a pedigree that's there. But man, there's something exciting about watching this Duke team play. They didn't have a huge competition this past weekend as they played North Carolina Central. They were able to really kind of have their way in that game as well. This week, I know you're not high on Virginia Tech. Maybe we shouldn't. I mean, nobody should be high on them right now. But they still bring along that name. They still bring along a great history there. And they're going to be coming to Durham this weekend. That game has been moved. How about this? That game has been moved to 7:00 on ESPN2. So it's going to be a primetime game. Going to be played under the lights. Going to get the national audience there. So I think everybody around the country is going to be able to have an opportunity to see what we've been able to see over the last couple of weeks with this Duke team as well. And we'll see what happens there. But man, I tell you, as a fan, you got to be happy. You got to be thrilled and proud of the way those guys are playing, the way those guys are competing, and doing it as a team. There's not like this massive standout guy that if he goes down, then that's the end of the season. But man, they're doing it as a team.
Yeah, I mean, that's exciting, man. That's exciting to be in that opportunity. You have Kentucky jumping up to 17, and then you have Duke jumping up in the 22nd position, which is just, being ranked 22nd for Duke. That's great, man. And they have an opportunity to continue moving up, because I guarantee this weekend is going to deliver just like last weekend. You're going to have upsets. And if they can find a way to win against a Virginia Tech team, because it's going to be a tough game. Don't get me wrong.
Sure.
But Duke, I just think they're in prime position. They're playing at home. They moved it to prime time, low time during the night to let everybody to watch this. And hopefully the build-up doesn't fall flat on its face. But after watching and seeing how Duke's delivered over the last few weeks, I don't see that happening. I think they're going to come ready to play. They're going to be fundamentally sound like they always are. And again, like you said, it goes back to coaching. They have a great coach on that sideline, and he's going to have his team ready to play.
Virginia Tech's going to be coming ready to play too. They, that lost Old Dominion, obviously, as big of a surprise that it was. I hope it didn't wake a sleeping giant right there. But they took a hard tumble this week as well, falling from 13 all the way out of the top 25. They didn't just fall down; they fell out of the top 25.
Yeah, man, you can't lose Old Dominion and not fall out. You probably fell to all the way out of the top 100. It's like, it's one of those dude, you might have been number one. You lost Old Dominion. What? Yep, gone. So, and some other notable drop from the rankings from this past week. Obviously, you said Virginia Tech. They were at number 13. Oklahoma State fell out completely. TCU was another one. Texas A&M, obviously, being on the fringe of the top 25 and 22nd. They're going to fall, losing to Alabama. And then Boston College, basically a no-show against Purdue. There's no reason for them to be in the top 25 after that loss. But again, that rounds out the new top 25. I mean, we're not going to run through all of them. But again, that I think we touched on the bases that were needed there, and we're going to transition over to basically the week 5 games, of note. And College Game Day has announced this week 5 location Saturday night, and that is going to be in Happy Valley for the Ohio State-Penn State game. Wow.
And, we Ohio State's obviously getting a lot of conversation. Penn State, they can come in there and they can handle some business down there, and they can go with a W. Man, this right here, it certainly would put Penn State back on the map for this particular season. That should be a great environment for a college football game, man. And I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah, let's go ahead for this game, even though we're going to be putting our predictions out there later on in the week. I just want to get your take on this one real quick, because I really don't think, again, watching Penn State struggle with Illinois, they got a great coach. They got actually a good quarterback. I think, but I just, after watching Ohio State play the way they did, I don't see them losing this game.
No, I would agree with that. Ohio State is extremely strong, man. They're playing really good ball. Penn State's not a team that we've been impressed with up to this point. They had the opportunity to impress us this weekend. I don't see it happening, but they do have that opportunity. So we'll see what happens. But I expect Urban Meyer to have his team ready to play. I fully expect their quarterback, man, to come out guns blazing, and we'll probably be talking about another Ohio State win come next week.
We have some big matchups coming up this week. And again, when you look on paper, it's not something, it's one of those, it is what it is. But we have some, when I say big matchups and some of the notable ones I want to talk about, we've already touched on the Ohio State and Penn State game, but you got a 4-0 Stanford team sitting at number 7 playing against a number 8 Notre Dame team, which again just changed my whole, outlook on their season after seeing them play this past week.
Man, this is a tough spot for Stanford to be in. They just came off of a huge emotional win against Oregon, where they had to travel there to Eugene, Oregon, and now they got to go to South Bend, Indiana, to play Notre Dame. Man, that's everybody knows about the environment that's there for Notre Dame when you start playing games there. Man, this is going to be a tough. I mean, just looking on paper, I would like to choose Stanford, but man, knowing what they just came out of and what they're heading into, that's going to be a tough game to pick. That's going to be a tough game for Stanford to win.
I would totally agree. I think, man, that one's one of those pick 'em to where it's like, who knows? I mean, it's like right. You ask me which Stanford team, and you can say that about any team, but when you look at these two teams, when they're in the top 10, it's like who's gonna show up, who's gonna be the one that shows up and gets the job done, and man. This prediction right here is going to take some real good thinking, man.
Right.
If you want to have a chance on this one, I got it. It's a 50-50. But when you look at it, it's like, man, some real good thinking needs to be thought out on this one. And to see if, again, I don't know if Notre Dame has officially announced it, but if they have, obviously that backup quarterback's the way to go. And I think he gives them the best chance to win in that Stanford game.
We'll see what happens there.
So the BYU Washington, man, BYU is one of those teams. Nobody's, coming off that win against Wisconsin. Washington just coming off that win against Arizona State. I think BYU pulls this one off, man, personally.
I was sitting here thinking, I've been thinking about it since since you got the report ready and we're just sitting there looking at stuff, looking at some matchups. And that game right there I had circled, just kind of the BYU Washington. Once again, I said earlier in our time together that I wasn't really sold on Washington. Maybe I should start being a little more sold on them and stop picking against them. But man, this BYU team, man, they're scrappy. They play hard. They're there, and they're able to come up with some big wins. Man, I can see BYU upsetting Washington on this one. I really can. I'm gonna reserve my final picks for later on in the week when I got a little more time to research and see what's going on there. But man, that one right there, that could be upset city.
Yeah, man, I totally on board with that whole. The way I feel about that game. I don't even know if I could put it into words right now because I just think BYU has everything, a recipe for an upset. They're sitting at number 20. I think they can pull it off. Again, like you said, we're not sold on Washington. I think they could go and do that job. But again, we're going to reserve our picks. You can see it at thecollegesportshour.com later on in the week. Hopefully we can get it done by Thursday, if not the latest Friday. But those picks will be out where we'll pick everybody in the top 25. Or actually, we're actually going to pick 10 games a week moving forward to where, the 10 most important games we see in the top 25 and putting predictions behind that, given our reasons why we feel that way. And it's good. It's a good read. It was awesome doing it this past week, and I look forward to continue doing that.
Absolutely, man. We're having a lot of fun doing this and getting a chance to pick the games and then talk about them as they happen. And then, man, getting a chance to kind of debrief for the week and then looking ahead as well.
So out of all of this, man, if you could pick one game out of all the matchups for week 5, who do you have on upset alert right now?
Well, we've already talked about Washington and BYU, so I won't necessarily go there. I don't know that it's necessarily an upset alert when you look again at that Oregon-California game. I can certainly see Oregon going into California and losing that one. So that one could happen there as well. I tell you what, I'm not calling this my upset pick yet. Okay, I'm still gonna reserve this one. I've been talking a little bit. We had the conversation about Oklahoma and their game against Army. I don't know if that's going to be a wake up call or not, but Baylor can score points. If Oklahoma had a tough time with Army, and I know it was a triple option, different kind of offense, but if Oklahoma's defense doesn't show up, I can see Baylor in a shootout, possibly beating and upsetting Oklahoma. I don't know about that just yet, but I could potentially see that happening.
I like that. I mean, when I look at it, I'm looking at, and for some reason, it's just jumping off the paper. And again, I don't know why I'm going with this, because one of my gut feeling is like I watch Alabama destroy them, but I'm looking at the Ole Miss LSU game. Okay. I'm looking at Ole Miss. I know they can have that vertical passing game. I think they could cause some problems, and LSU just getting by some of these teams and on cruise control. I think that Ole Miss could keep this interesting and could possibly pull that upset off.
I tell you what, man, we say it all the time. I wouldn't be surprised to see any of this stuff happen. And just who would have ever called Old Dominion over Virginia Tech? So right now, I'm going to sit there and say anything is possible.
I like that. All right, buddy. I appreciate you jumping on tonight.
Yeah.
And again, like the first two episodes is great. Thanks for your time, man.
Yeah, man. No, man, it's been a lot of fun. I'm enjoying it. I hope our listeners are enjoying it, getting a lot out of it. Man, it's just fun. Two fans being able to jump on here and talk about college sports. We love it, and I hope you guys are loving it too.
Without a doubt. Guys, thank you so much for listening to the College Sports Hour podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, check out our website at collegesportshour.com, where we continue the college sports conversation. This podcast has been brought to you by our sponsor, McPherson Marketing Group. If you're in the market for anything digital marketing related, check them out at McPhersonMarketingGroup.com. We also want to give a special shout out to Adam Bird at Heroes Media Group for bringing this podcast on board, as well as Trey Caraway over at Blue 4 Tactical and to Kyle Snyder over at Archangel Alliance. Don't forget, guys, to join us next week for another episode of the College Sports Hour.